Creating a serverless API load tester with AWS SQS, a step-by-step guide. This podcast is brought to you by Business Compass LLC. We are an Amazon Web Services advanced consulting partner. We build and migrate workloads to Amazon Cloud. Our website is businesscompassllc.com. Our phone number is 973-638-2228. Our email address is contact@businesscompassllc.us. Introduction. Serverless load testing made easy. Ensuring your services can handle a significant load in modern API development is essential. Traditional load testing solutions often require infrastructure management challenges and incur high costs. However, with serverless architecture, you can build a scalable, cost-effective, and easy-to-maintain load tester using AWS Simple Queue Service, SQS. This podcast will walk you through creating a serverless API load tester that leverages AWS SQS to simulate traffic, allowing you to stress test your APIs with minimal overhead. Prerequisites: AWS account, Node.js, serverless framework, and AWS SQS queue. Before diving into the setup, make sure you have the following prerequisites. AWS account. You'll need an active AWS account to create the necessary resources. Node.js. Install Node.js on your local machine to handle the project dependencies. Serverless framework. The serverless framework simplifies the deployment of serverless applications. You can install it globally using npm. npm install gserverless. AWS SQS queue. Set up an AWS SQS queue to handle the messages or requests that simulate traffic to your API. AWS SQS queue setup, configuration and integration. The first step in building your load tester is setting up an AWS SQS queue. This queue will store the messages representing individual API requests during the load test. Here's how you can configure your SQS queue. Log in to AWS Management Console, navigate to the SQS service. Create a new queue, click Create Queue and choose Standard or FIFO queue, depending on your use case. Configure queue settings. Name your queue and adjust settings like visibility timeout and message retention period according to your testing requirements. Integration with serverless framework. Add the SQS queue configuration to your serverless.yml file, ensuring that your Lambda function will trigger based on the messages in the queue. Project deployment. Serverless framework deployment steps. Once your SQS queue is ready, it's time to deploy the load tester using the serverless framework. Initialize the project. Serverless create template AWS Node.js path load tester. CD load tester. Install dependencies. Add necessary libraries like AWS SDK and Axios to interact with AWS services and make HTTP requests. npm install AWS SDK Axios. Define functions in serverless.yml. Configure your Lambda function to process SQS messages and send API requests. Deploy to AWS. Serverless deploy. This command will create and deploy all the necessary AWS resources, including the Lambda function, IAM roles, and the SQS queue. Running your load test, endpoint usage and request formatting. With your load tester deployed, you can run tests by sending messages to the SQS queue. Each message should contain the necessary information for the API request, such as the endpoint, method, headers, and body. Message structure. Format your SQS messages to include details like API endpoint, request method, headers, and payload. For example, endpoint, https://api.example.com/resource. Method, post. Headers. Content type, application/JSON. Body. Key, value. Send messages to SQS. Use AWS SDK, Postman, or the AWS CLI to send multiple messages to the SQS queue. Each message represents an API request that the Lambda function will process. Monitor the test. Track your API's performance as the load test runs, paying attention to response times, error rates, and throughput. Additional resources: GitHub repository and Postman collection. To make your load testing journey smoother, we've created a GitHub repository and a Postman collection. GitHub repository. Link to repository. This repository contains the entire codebase for the serverless load tester, including the serverless.yml configuration, Lambda function code, and deployment scripts. Postman collection. Link to collection, a ready-to-use Postman collection for sending test messages to your SQS queue. These resources will help you get up and running quickly and can be customized to fit your testing needs. Get involved, share your feedback and ideas for improvement. We hope this podcast helps you build a robust, serverless API load tester using AWS SQS. We encourage you to try it out and share your feedback. If you have any ideas for improvements or new features, please contribute to the GitHub repository or contact us directly. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please share this podcast, visit our website and follow our social media links.